Joining me now from the Daily Caller, Amber Athey. Amber, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Liz.
All right, Amber, let's start at the beginning of this report from the FBI, because it seems like most mainstream media outlets are twisting and turning, creating their own alternative facts for what this report actually said. So there was an increase in the number of hate crimes from 2015 to 2016, 5% to be exact. And these are only the ones reported to law enforcement, though.
That's right. They're only the ones reported to law enforcement. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the amount of hate crimes against white people went up 20%, which makes it the fastest growing category of racially motivated hate crimes in the country. And the Associated Press released an article about this, and they actually claimed that hate crimes against black people increased when the number of offenses reported of anti-black hate crimes actually decreased by 3 offenses. So there's a lot of misdirection going on here in the media, and the narrative is clear. The narrative is that because President Donald Trump was elected, his rhetoric is motivating people to commit hate crimes against Latinos, against Muslims, against blacks, whatever minority group they can think of. And in the AP report, actually, they say, well, by the way, President Trump's rhetoric could have contributed to this. And this is just straight journalistic malpractice to say this when that doesn't match up with the statistics in the FBI's report. In order for them to be speculating accurately, they would have to speculate on why people are committing so many anti-white crimes. Is it because of the rise of Antifa and Black Lives Matter in this country? Is it because of the left's insistence on identity politics? And for them to only purport to blame this on Trump is just completely biased.
It is. It exposes, like I said in the introduction, it exposes their agenda. And their agenda, of course, is anti-Trump here. I want to show this Associated Press headline on the screen. This is in the form of a tweet with their article when they're talking about the rise in hate crimes, the racially motivated hate crimes against black people, white people, Muslims. A new FBI report, they say, says hate crimes, especially against Muslims, went up in 2016. Well, that one's actually from Vox, but it says much the same thing. There's the one from the Associated Press. If we look at the number of hate crimes, first of all, I don't know why we can't all just condemn all hate crimes for any reason as horrible, why we have to point fingers here. But there was actually a decrease in hate crimes against black people from 2015 and 2016. So not only was some of what they said just inaccurate and twisted, some of it was just false.
That's correct. And I think one of the major problems here is that people were talking for months on end about how hate crimes were going to increase under Trump against minorities. And unfortunately, the demand for these hate crimes far outweighs the supply. And the result of that is that not only do you have the media producing these biased reports about what's going on, but you also have a lot of host hate crimes that are coming out. Look at what happened at the Air Force Academy very, very recently. There was an incident where 5 black airmen were targeted with racial epithets on their dormitory whiteboards. And the Air Force head came out and strongly denounced the attack, as he should have. But then the Air Force Academy was given an award for their response to the incident, only to find out that it was committed by one of the people who claimed to be targeted by it. So it was a hate crime that was actually committed by someone who was hoping to cover up his own offenses that would have gotten him suspended from the school.
Right, and that's why it's so important, I think, to remember that this FBI report is only the reported hate crimes, too. There are so many of these that aren't reported or that aren't redacted once they are reported, even if they were a hoax here. So we have these 2 different categories: hate crimes based off of based off of racial biases, and then hate crimes based off of religious biases. Those are the 2 main categories. So we went through the racial ones. Let's target the religious ones just for a moment here, because this is very interesting. A lot of these headlines, again, talked about Islamophobia, talked about Muslims being targeted for their religious beliefs. They blamed it, like you said, on President Trump and his rhetoric, on the travel ban that doesn't actually target Muslims but targets Islamists. But in fact, if you look at all of the hate crimes motivated by religious bias, and there were 1,538 hate crimes motivated by religious bias in this report, over half of them, 54%, were committed against Jewish people.
Yeah, and anti-Semitism is a really growing problem, especially in universities. There was actually a report put out, I think it was back in January, that found that anti-Semitism on college campuses was growing really rapidly. There's also a lot of bias against Christians, as I'm sure you know, in this country. And a lot of the hate crimes that have been reported against Muslims also turned out to be hoaxes. For example, there were anti-Muslim things spray painted on mosques. There was an incident in California where a woman claimed that 3 men assaulted her and ripped her hijab off her head, and all of those turned out to be hoaxes. And not only just hoaxes, but their motivation behind those incidents was specifically to try to pin it on Trump and his rhetoric and the alleged Islamophobia going on in this country. And so I think, unfortunately for the left, this really shakes their narrative about there being just evil people in this country, specifically white men who voted for Donald Trump. All of that is falling apart with the FBI's new report.
Right. Well, what they're trying to do by blaming the increase in hate crimes, the 5% increase in hate crimes, and there have been an increase in hate crimes against Muslims, although not against black people. What they're doing by trying to blame Donald Trump is trying to smear every single person in our country who voted for Donald Trump, make it seem like every Republican voter is a white supremacist, and that's a dangerous rhetoric, and it also creates a conundrum for them, I think, because if they blame Donald Trump's rhetoric for an increase in hate crimes against Muslim, they also, to be logically consistent, would have to blame the rhetoric, like you said, from Black Lives Matter, from Antifa, even from some Democratic politicians for the rise in hate crimes against white people from college campuses. And they don't do that. They don't do it equally. They pretend Donald Trump is responsible for everything. They're responsible for nothing.
Right, and the other motivation here is that a lot of these hate crimes are used to push a social justice agenda. So if you look at a hate crime that was committed at Eastern Michigan University, the university came out, they denounced the hate crime, but that wasn't enough for the students. The students claimed that they needed, bias hotlines, bias reporting systems, racial diversity coalitions, etc. The school went ahead and gave in to all of their demands. And then a year later, just about a month ago, we found out it was committed by a black man. And it turns out it wasn't actually a hate crime at all. He wasn't motivated by politics or religion. So they use these hate crimes to push their social justice agenda in order to push the progressive agenda. And it's just another politically veiled, motivated system. And they don't seem to actually care about the victims involved. They just want to use it so that they can push this narrative.
Right. They just want to use it to further their agenda of identity politics, and they only cherry pick and choose the statistics that help further that agenda, and they ignore the very real statistics on the other side that counter it. Amber, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.